Usually Janice jumps on here for a little bit, but she was on during our buyers, the buyer side foreclosures, which was a lot longer than we anticipated it to be. I give a little bit of a background on how the whole process is initiated, and I will do it similarly today, but be a little bit of a faster explanation on how do we actually get to the point where a house gets foreclosed on and then goes to the market, and kind of the steps involved in that. It's a little bit less involved when you're listing foreclosures as opposed to when you're helping a buyer buy foreclosures, because there's a lot of extra due diligence and investigation into a foreclosure to represent the interests of a buyer, more so than the disposition side, which is the sales side of it, right? Representing the bank in order to sell it and find a suitable buyer. So we'll brush on that quickly on what leads up to the bank actually taking possession of a property, and then we'll be able to move on and what are the processes about actually listing and helping the bank to sell a property that they've taken back. So we'll cover that. So I see people that are just logging in now, so I'll give it another minute. Hey, good afternoon.
How are you today?
Doing great, Mark. You're over in PEI. You and I met when Laura Lee and I were over there about a month and a half ago.
Yeah, we had the dinners at John Brown's.
Yeah, exactly. Dinners and beers. My favorite part. My favorite part of the dinner.
Hey, Mark, how you making out?
Pretty good, Dennis. How have you been?
Not too bad.
So we got a few folks joining us from PEI. I think I saw somebody else from PEI that chimed in earlier. Tara, are you there somewhere? She's got, I think she's from the PEI office.
I am, yeah.
Cool. Oh, there you are. Hi. Okay, so 7 minutes past. I'll give it one more minute for the stragglers to log on, and then we'll get started. So has anybody at this point, what kind of experience, let me ask you this, what kind of experience do we have right now online here? Like, how many years have we all got in the business? Is anybody over 1 year, more than a year? So everybody online right now is less than a year in the real estate business?
6 months.
6 months. Okay, Sonia, yeah. How are you finding it so far?
A little overwhelming at times, but I'm having a lot of fun with it too, though. So every day is different.
Yeah, every day is a learning day.
Yeah.
Right, for the first couple of years. Well, and even for me, this is last year and a half has definitely been a bit of a learning year for me too. I've gone through 3 swing cycles in the real estate industry since I've been in. It's kind of funny because they say, you know, economic cycles come in 7-year cycles, but if you average it out, that's kind of what it's been for me. I've been in the business for 25 years and I've gone through 3 upswing cycles. The first one in 1998 to 2008, that whole decade was an upswing market for Halifax. And then there was a correction, which was a global correction, 2009 to 2010. Then it went back to an upswing market, and then 2014 and 2015, it took a little bit of a dip and then started to climb 2016 to 2019. 2019 was a really healthy year, and then COVID hit and just, you know, propelled everything into the stratosphere. So yeah, so it's been learning, and that's you'll never stop learning in this industry, that's for sure. There's always something to learn every day.
Yeah.
So Tara from PEI, 22 years. Wow, you're a veteran. Good for you. So let me ask you guys from PEI, do you see a lot of, do you guys see a lot of foreclosures at all, or have you in the PEI market?
I haven't. I don't really know how to deal with them. I'd like to learn maybe.
Yeah. Not right now, Tara. Okay. Right now, it's kind of a different market for foreclosures, only because it's been taboo for a couple of years at this point. When COVID hit, people lost their jobs, people weren't working. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there was a moratorium, government legislated, that banks are not to foreclose on people during this pandemic for obvious reasons. Not fair that because a global pandemic hit and people can't work, that the bank should be taking their homes from them, right? Completely out of their control in that regard. And it's the volume of foreclosures would be through the roof if that was the case. Even if there wasn't a moratorium on it, the foreclosure process involves the courts, and unfortunately the courts were closed. Well, fortunately for the homeowners, I guess, but the courts were closed and they weren't having hearings. So at that rate, banks couldn't foreclose even if they wanted to during the pandemic. Now, as the court started to open up, I guess there are some applicants that went in there to try and seek legal proceedings to initiate the foreclosure process and get a judgment for foreclosure. So you'll probably start seeing them now as the restrictions are starting to relax and that the courts are starting to open. Now, there's probably a huge backlog. But even still, I think the banks are more inclined to work with people to try and get them back on a payment program and get to collecting some of the money that they're owed on the mortgage if they're in arrears for the mortgage. And if somebody is still unserved and not working, then obviously they may have to be exempt from the foreclosure proceedings, only because, again, if this pandemic is prohibiting people from going to work and earning their wage in their industry, then the banks are going to have to be a little bit more lenient and understanding that they can't just go and start foreclosing on a bunch of people because of a pandemic. So, all right. So just wanted to get some idea. So those people that are, I guess everybody online right now, with the exception of Tara, who's got 22 years of experience, has anybody come across the listing rate at this point that has been a foreclosure? Nobody? Okay. All right. So about a month ago, I guess, I did a session on the buying side of foreclosures. And basically the way I started was, how does a house end up into the foreclosure world anyway, right? So what happens is if somebody starts getting behind in their mortgage payments, the collection agents from the bank or the finance company start calling and looking to say, okay, you've just missed your mortgage payment. It was due a week ago, 2 weeks ago. We need a payment at this point. When the borrower gets themselves into a situation where they can't pay the mortgage back, and there's a number of reasons why that happens. There is job loss. There's divorce. There is family fighting. I've seen that, where I'm not paying the mortgage if you're not paying the mortgage. I'm not carrying the weight for you, so I'm going to stop. And then they'd rather lose it to the bank than keep up on the mortgage. Financial irresponsibility, just over borrowing, consumer debts through the roof. You've got 3 or 4 credit cards and they're all maxed out. You're behind in your power bill. You're behind in your phone bill. Just because you just borrowed too much money based on your level of income, and there's no way you can ever get out of it, right? So there's a number of different reasons why people start getting into trouble and they stop paying their mortgage. So after about 3 months, generally, of the bank chasing people for money and not getting anywhere, they pretty soon realize, and when they start calling and they're getting nobody to answer the phone, they're leaving messages on the message center and nobody's returning their phone call, that's a big indicator that this person is delinquent in their payments, and they're probably never going to catch up, right? They're just gone AWOL. So after about the 4th month of them being chased, the bank says, okay, we've had enough of chasing these people with being unresponsive. We need to get our money back, right? So then they have to apply to the courts to initiate foreclosure. So they build a case of evidence against the homeowner or the borrower who failed to honor their side of the mortgage commitment, to say, you're supposed to pay us back at least once a month, a certain amount, and you haven't paid us for 4 months. So at this point, we're exercising our right to recover our funds with the security on the property. So they have to go and they present the evidence to the court. the borrower actually has an opportunity to show up in court as well and defend their position, right? You should not foreclose on me for all these reasons. However, most of the time, the borrower knows I don't stand a chance. I'm going to lose my house. I can never catch up with the payments, and they don't show up at court. So if you don't show up at court to argue your side of the case, they can only see one side of the evidence, and there's an extremely good chance that they're going to get the judgment for foreclosure. It's going to get granted to the bank to go ahead and initiate the court foreclosure process. They have to serve the borrower, say your house is going to foreclosure. This is the date of the foreclosure sheriff sale. On the date of the sheriff sale, if you don't show up or redeem your position on the mortgage, we're going to sell it at the sheriff sale, and then the house is gone forever, right? Now, in the meantime, when a borrower is in arrears on their mortgage, the mortgage company will actually send the management company or a management company by to make sure that the property is either being maintained or it's still occupied. If it's unoccupied and it looked like the house has been abandoned, they will get instructions from the mortgager to say, go secure the property, which means they just can't leave their property abandoned and unsecured, because then everybody's going to try and infiltrate that, steal the copper plumbing, steal the copper wires. I've seen heating systems being taken. Sometimes they will sever the oil lines in the property, that kind of stuff, steal the copper wires from the oil tank and not turn the valve off. So whatever oil's in the tank is going to leach all over the property. I've seen that happen. Hines Road over in Eastern Passage. I work on a file over there, and that's exactly what happened. And over a half a tank of oil was spilled on the property because these people came along and stole the copper line that went from the oil tank into the house and didn't bother to turn off the valve. So unfortunately, that was a huge loss for the finance company. So as soon as the management company drives by and they see that the house has been unoccupied and abandoned, they see all the signs, the power's cut off to the house, the lawn's overgrown, they'll go up and they'll actually knock on the door. And if they look through the windows and see that the furniture's all gone, they're going to tell the bank, and then the bank is going to give them instructions to secure the house. That means they change the locks and they turn off the water and they winterize it, and they get temporary heating devices installed so that, on like coming into the winter time, you don't get pipes that freeze and crack and break and all that kind of stuff. So then they secure the house. At the same hi. Okay, wasn't a question for me. So at this point, you may be required. So if you work with the bank, and one of the questions is, well, how do you get foreclosure work? Right? Does anybody know how do you get foreclosure work from the bank? All right. So most of the time is building relationships with that financial institution. Okay. I started off about 16 years ago. A friend of mine was a branch manager for household finance on Robey Street. And he called me one day and just said, hey, listen, we have a house in Sheet Harbor that we repossess. We need somebody to represent us and sell it. So I was like, okay, well, I don't do business in Sheet Harbor, so let me find somebody. Anyway, the company owner where I was working at the time said, if you've never done business with a finance company before, we got some feedback coming back from somebody. If you've never done business with this finance company before, I would recommend you go jump in your car and go list this property. Right? He said, it's going to be the best advice you ever received in real estate. And to date, he's probably right, because I worked with household finance that got bought out by HSBC Financial. And I went on probably a 14 or 15 year run with them, selling their foreclosures exclusively in the Halifax Regional Municipality, and did a tremendous amount of business with them. So that was the relationship that I had, but I did have to prove myself. I had to make sure that they knew that I was there to represent their interests, because some people are short-sighted and they try and take advantage of the banks because they're multi-billion-dollar companies. They try to cut corners. They're not worried about, digging in and doing a good job with negotiations. And I always made sure I did. And because of that, they recognized it, and I got all of their foreclosure work. So I was extremely busy in foreclosures for at least 10 years solid, especially going through the 2008, because this is the subprime market, and HSBC Finance was the finance side. So they were the equitable mortgagers. So they were high risk. And they fell into that subprime market that got hit pretty hard back in 2008, 2009, and 2010. So I had a lot of business going on then. So today, in order to get foreclosure listings, you would need to reach out and form relationships with mortgage brokers or mortgage specialists, okay? You're better off going to the branches, talking to the bank managers, and then getting them to introduce you to the mortgage brokers or mortgage specialists within the branch. And that's because you need to form a relationship, and it's all about reciprocity with these banks now. It's, if you are going to send us mortgage clients, then whenever we have foreclosures, then we will refer those foreclosures to you and get you to help us list and sell them, right? So it's all about forming relationships with the banks. It's a little harder as a newer agent, because if you don't have a high volume of established business and you're not referring a lot of business to the bank, well, the bank's got to look at the people who feed them the most, and they're going to say, okay, these are the people that we need to pad and have relationships with, because they're the ones that send us all these mortgages, right? So if you're a busy and productive, experienced agent, then you've got a bit of an advantage. But if you're not doing a lot of business with the banks, then you might want to have to try and develop a personal relationship and sell yourself and sell your service and say, hey, listen, I'm new, but I'll tell you what, I will put everything into this relationship, because I don't have a lot of new business at the moment. And you're going to be the person that I focus on most to make sure that I get your property sold, right? So basically that would be my advice in trying to get any foreclosure business, would be to try and form a better relationship with those financial institutions. So if you're called to duty and say you get somebody from the branch that reaches out and says, hey, listen, I've got the bank just took back a property, want you to list it for us, what then, right? So what you're going to experience is they're going to be different listings than most of the listings that you're going to put on the market for sale. You have to do a market analysis on the property, and sometimes that's a pretty tough thing, because if the people who own the houses couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, they probably couldn't afford to do the upkeep and the maintenance on the property for a number of years at the same time, right? Most people who lose their house to foreclosure don't all of a sudden just lose it, unless there's something traumatic that happened in their life, i.e., they got sick unexpectedly, diagnosed with a terminal disease, fell down, got hurt, don't have workers' compensation coverage because they're self-employed, don't have short-term or long-term disability coverage. So all of a sudden they can't work anymore and they can't pay the bills. That can happen, right? And it'd be like 4 or 5 months from that point. So the house might be well maintained up to that point. But the chronic delinquent payment people, those are the people that are just financially irresponsible. A lot of the times they over borrow, and they can't pay it back, and they get themselves into financial trouble. And you can probably think in your life some of those people that just are not responsible financially. They're the ones generally that I see when I go in to evaluate a house, that there's a lot of deferred maintenance or neglect.
And that's thermal relief valve. Great thing to have, just an extra one, or at least a plug. That's a 1/2 inch hole there, I believe. And so if you had a plug, you could also just plug it. But that's the purpose of.
All right. Sorry, just had to mute Michael. Anyway, so that's one of the things that you're going to have to try to evaluate. And it gets a little tougher, because if you go into a house that has a lot of deferred maintenance problems, you go in and the carpets are in filthy shape, and the flooring is in bad shape, and the bathrooms needs a ton of work, the kitchen needs a ton of work, the heating system hasn't been serviced in a long time. Outside, the windows are rotting, and some of them are broken, and decks are rotted. You got a lot of, it's a bit harder to actually put a price on a house like that. Wouldn't you guys agree? Right? So you have to get versed in identifying costs. So if any of you guys studied with me on Wednesday evenings, one of the evaluations that we do is the cost approach. And you have to understand cost. when you're putting values on these types of houses. What does it cost to have a deck replaced right now, the size to replace the one that's there? What does it cost to reshingle the roof because it's way overdue? What does it cost to get some chimney work done or replace the heating system or, have a house painted out, flooring, all those kind of things? You have to cost it out because when you're doing the CMA for a foreclosure and it needs all of this work, the average, because you're not going to find when you go into the market a bunch of houses that are foreclosed on and in that condition. They're the rare ones. When you go into the market, you're like, okay, we've got all these houses that are seemingly in really good shape, and this one is in terrible condition. So how do I figure out the price between the one that's I'm dealing with and all of these ones that are in really good marketable condition? That's when you have to allocate a value to each of the improvements to bring the condition of the house, the subject property, up to the condition of the other homes in the neighborhood. So that's a bit of an art form in itself. So you have to do a market analysis and take those things into consideration when you're forming your opinion of value and telling the bank how much do they think they can get back for this house when it goes to market. So that's one of the challenges in trying to put one of these houses on the market. Now, sometimes, depending on what your opinion is, the bank is not going to go with it anyway. They're just going to say, okay, we see what you think, but we need more out of it. You can still go ahead and list it, but this is what you're going to list it for, right? You can take it or leave it at that point. If you don't think you're going to be able to sell it, then don't take the listing. But if you think, hey, I'll give it a go, and if it doesn't work, here's the magic thing. When the bank takes over a foreclosure, they will reduce the property on a 30-day period basis. Every 30 days, they're going to want a market analysis. They want a market activity update. So what did you do over the last 30 days to promote the property? How many showings? How many offers? If it was like very little showings or very few showings, very few offers or no offers at all, then they know that the price is too high given the condition of the market and the home. So they'll ask you to reduce the property. So even if it's a higher price than you really want, it's going to create a higher, longer market time. But eventually they want to get rid of this property. They're going to want to sell it. And after 30 days, they'll reduce it. And then you got to sit on the market for another 30 days. If it doesn't sell, they're going to reduce it. And after 30 days, they'll reduce it and so on until finally somebody comes along and says, that's the right price. I'll pay it and I'll buy it and close on it. So the opinion of value is important, but it's going to be a lot of work. So when you list for the bank is going to ask you to list the property, and you list it no differently than you list any other property. You get you take the measurements and all of the information about the property that you can discover. But one of the limiting factors to marketing a property is the fact that you have very little information available. The bank is not the former owner. They're just the mortgager in possession. They lent the money. In order to get their money back, they have to repossess it and then sell it. So they don't have heating and electrical costs. They don't have what's been upgraded in the house over the last 5 years. They don't know when the septic system was last pumped. They don't know if it even works. They don't know the quality of the water. So your information that you actually can convey to a buyer is very, very, very limited, right? So, and oftentimes a bank is usually not even willing to provide information because their lawyers a lot of times say, if you provide information, it has to be definitely without warranty. And banks like to say, no, it's as is where is. I'm not providing you with any information because sometimes that can open up for liability, right? If the information is wrong or inaccurate, then the person they supplied that information to relies on it and something goes wrong, then they feel like they need to sue the bank because the bank provided them with false or misleading or inaccurate information. So the banks are like, it's as is where is, we're not providing you with anything. So your discovery of the property, you can do what you want to do as a listing agent to try and get ahead of certain things. Like you can go into property online, you can research the past title of the property. Sometimes you can find the subdivision plans of properties when you go into property online. You can see if there's easements or right-of-ways that are through properties that might affect your ability to sell the property. And these are all things that you should discover up front before you agree to list the property. And even when you're listing and forming an opinion of value, it's up to you to discover all of those things that you can possibly discover that may positively or negatively affect the value of the property. Okay, so but again, there's certain limitations on what you are able to convey. Now, there are cases where when I represented HSBC Finance, the mortgage specialist up there, the collections litigation team, they would send me a location certificate to the property because they had one on file for some reason. But it's with a warranty. Here it is. Any reliance is at the buyer's risk. So they would do that from time to time. But basically your job is to discover what you can, and eventually you just have to go to market with whatever information is available or not available. So in the listing process, you collect all the data that you can. You fill out the listing agreement no differently than you would with any other seller. But there's one thing that you have to attach to the listing most of the time, and that is the bank Schedule A. Does anybody know what a bank Schedule A is?
Yeah, Chad, is it not them saying that they have basically no liability, kind of no warranties, that they have no attachment to the house legally? Is that correct?
Correct. Absolutely right. Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's their indemnity. I am not conveying anything, any sort of warranty whatsoever. This is an as is, where is situation. And that falls down to like title issues. The reason why they don't represent warranty deed is because they're not a knowledgeable title owner. They don't know all of the ins and outs of title. They don't know what the history of the title has been. All they did was lend the buyer the money to buy this property, or they refinanced and lent money to the buyer or the homeowner and use the property as security if they don't pay back, right? So they don't have any information about the property. They don't know if the septic system works. They don't know if there's good potable water. They don't know if there's mold or mildew growing in the house or any of those things. So they can't disclose. And it's an as is where. So the onus is on the buyer and the buyer's agent. That's why there's a whole lot more work generally when it comes to helping a buyer purchase a foreclosure than listing a foreclosure and putting it on the market. So when you list, they will provide you with the bank schedule, and it goes through, my bank schedule when I worked with HSBC was like a page and a half long. I've seen them as many as 4 pages long with other financial institutions of all the things they don't represent or warrant, and what you are going to ask and what you're not going to ask them to do, what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. So that schedule is retained by you as the listing agent in your files. If you go on Paragon or MLS, and in the document section, if you find any bank foreclosures currently, you'll see that there's a remark in the remarks, property being conveyed in as is, where is condition, and in the instructions to members, it will say Schedule A to be attached to all agreement of purchase and sale. And it's uploaded into the document section of the listing. So you can go to the document section and download it and see all of the conditions that the bank has put in their bank schedule, right? And they will not look at it unless that schedule is attached to the agreement of purchase and sale. They won't even look at the agreement of purchase and sale without that. So your responsibility when it comes to listing and selling foreclosures, once you get the property on the market, you've done your homework, you've acquired as much information as you can to help educate buyers and understand your value. I mean, I sold a house out in Fall River. It had a power easement that consumed almost 80% of the land area of the property we sold. It was a $500 and something thousand house on the lake on Sheffield Court in Fall River, and there was a Nova Scotia power easement over 80% of the property, right? The bank didn't give me that information. I found that on property online, right? And I was like, whoa. Now this was an easement, by the way, that was registered in the 1920s, late 1920s. It's like, well, if they didn't exercise it by now, they're never going to exercise it. But you can't warrant that because the next day they might string, high powered voltage lines over the property. but the easement was there in case they needed to do that at some point, right? But that's something that I knew was going to adversely affect the value of the property. And I had to be aware of that, because if the buyers or the buyer's lawyer discovered that, or the buyer's agent was keen enough to discover that material fact, they may place a lower value on the property because of this, right? Because in this panel thinks that having a 80% power, Nova Scotia power easements through the property benefits them? Not too many people, unless Nova Scotia Power was ready to expropriate or buy that property and pay you more than market value. But most of the time, things like that are going to have a negative impact to the value. So those are the types of things that you need to discover and have available when you sell foreclosures. Once you're ready to go to the market, you've got the seller designated brokerage agreement signed up. The listing addendum is not going to look any differently than you would with any other property. And when you list it on MLS, you can do whatever you want to do in terms of the marketing side of it. You have to understand that if you're going to do your marketing, would you go and put a drone in the air? Would you do virtual tours of a foreclosure? I mean, that's to your discretion. I personally would, right? Because you should serve the bank no differently than you should serve any other client, because they are your client. And for me particularly, I treated them no differently. I treat all my clients the same. And the fact that I treated them as well as I did, they really appreciated it. And I did 15 or 16 or 14 years of business with this company, right? Because they really came to understand I was in it for them, right? And I fought for every nickel and dime. This is a $1 billion company. And they were like, I remember they accepted an offer before even calling me to say, what should I do? They just sent back the accepted deal. I sent it up to them and I said, here's an offer we just received today. Call me when you've received this so we can discuss it. And then I just automatically got an email response saying, yeah, we've accepted the offer. I was like, you didn't even give me a chance to do anything for you. How do I know this is the best deal? She said, well, we're happy with it. I said, well, hang on a minute. Let me go to work for you and do what I do. Well, I got them $10,000 more. Now, most agents would have said, hey, good, quick sale. When I did that, I proved it to them that I'm in their corner, right? And although I could have just let it ride, they saw that I didn't, and I got $10,000 more. And they realized this is a guy that's not just out for him, he's out for us, right? And that was a big message that I sent. And I was told after the fact why they like to work with me specifically, because not a lot of agents that they were working with at the time would have done that, right? So that kind of separated me from them. But again, virtual tours, why not? Right? You got an out-of-town buyer from Ontario that wants to invest in real estate down here. Why not show them what they're getting? Right? It might excite them to see how bad this house looks, because an investor, the uglier the house, the more money I'm going to make as an investor. So you do all of the marketing that you need to do for a foreclosure no differently than you would do for anything else. Right? But once you go to the market, then it's up to the buyer's agents to come in and show the property. By the way, if you do happen to get foreclosures, pay attention to the people that call and vet your investors, because there's a lot of investors. I regret, because I was really busy back in the day when I was dealing with these foreclosures, and didn't have the training like you guys are walking into today. Pretty much self-taught. You're out there and you're slugging it out and doing the best you can. Didn't have a lot of guidance back 15, 20 years ago. But I wish I would have retained the list of investors that called me and said, anytime you get a foreclosure or an investment opportunity like this, give me a call, right? So if you ever get a foreclosure or something that needs a lot of work, retain a list of investors, because these guys are serious. And I never did follow up. I probably could have had 40 or 50 different investor names that I could have worked with and didn't retain them, right? So little nugget of advice that I will give you when it comes to who's going to be calling on this. You're going to get a lot of people calling when you're listing your foreclosures. Be careful of the people that do call. You're going to get people that are going to ask, is the bank willing to do a rent to own? No, bank wants their money back and they don't want to deal with this property ever again, right? They're not interested in doing a rent to own. But you do get, some low quality buyers calling, people that have just been discharged from bankruptcy and they want to go and try and get a house and they see this cheap foreclosure. You got a lot of first-time home buyers with, oh, I know my uncle's a contractor, my cousin's an electrician, my whatever, and they just think they're going to come in there and buy this house and make it work for them. But a lot of times they can't because it's just way over their head. When you do your marketing, save everything you've done. You have to report into the bank at the end of the month. At the end of the 30-day period, you have to tell them what you've done. You have to make a reasonable effort to try and sell this property, and you have to tell them what you've done, if you've showed the property yourself, or how many showings by other brokerages, and what are the results, how many offers. And if none, then they have to say, okay, well, what's your advice right now? And my advice was, you're probably going to need to have to reduce the price, and this is what I would reduce it to. And after 30 days, they're like, yep, go ahead. And we would reduce and move on. When you're representing the bank, again, when I was doing on the buyer's side, banks can't just discount the price. If they take it back, they're like, okay, we're owed $200,000. The house is worth $350, but we don't care. We're going to dump it for $200,000. They cannot do that, right? So you're going to get people when you're listing it, you're going to get buyers agents that don't understand that. And they're kind of buyers and buyers agents. They're going to call you and say, yeah, I'm going to make a verbal offer to the bank. I know it's listed for $349.9, but I'm going to give them $275. Not going to happen. Tell them, well, you can put it in writing if you want, but the bank is going to send it back within minutes to reject it, because they're not going to just, banks are not in the habit of just dumping properties and giving away the former homeowner's equity. They can't do it, for one thing. So you're going to get lowball offers coming in because they just think, oh, it's a bank foreclosure and I'm going to get a screaming deal. Once in a while you can get those, but it's very rare, right? What you're looking at is the potential. You're going to get this derelict house, this very neglected, abused house, and you're going to fix it up, and then there's going to be some profit for you at the end of the day. That's where the deals are, right? That's when you have the resources to be able to put a house together. So that's on the buying side. On the listing side, you're there to protect the bank and the bank interests and to be able to get as much money for the bank as you can, right? So you negotiate it the same way as you would with any other seller, right? It's not a whole lot different. Most of the time, the banks, they have a matrix they work with. And if the offer comes in and it's close, you've presented them with the best offer you can get out of the market, they'll probably accept it. And then it's up to the buyer to do all of their due diligence. And your job as a listing agent is primarily over with, and then you just service the needs. If something comes back and they want to try and renegotiate after an inspection, you represent your seller client and you try and get your best deal out of it. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a price reduction because your seller client, the bank, is not going to go in there and fix anything. Once in a while, they will get their management company to go in and put a reverse osmosis system on the water treatment, on the water supply, or they'll put in an ultraviolet light system because the twice now the water sample came back with bacteria in it. And to get over that, to make sure it is able to be mortgaged and financed, the finance company who is lending the money to the new buyer will want a potable water sample, right? So that's about the extent of what the seller, the bank, is willing to do. And that is just to be, they understand without a potable water sample, they're not going to be able to sell this house to most buyers that are willing to buy it. Right, you got the odd guy that comes in with, or investor gal that comes in with cash purchase, right? But that's rare. Most people do want to finance it. In order to finance it, you got to provide a potable water sample. So the bank knows if we have to put in a reverse osmosis system or a UV light, it's less than $1,000 in most cases. So we'll just do that and get it over with and get the house sold. On closing, no different. You send all the closing documents and the agreement of purchase and sale over to the lawyers, and the lawyers close the property, right? So it's not a whole lot different from the listing perspective than the same process with a residential sale with the homeowner selling the property versus the bank selling the property. There's a few more steps. There's a little bit of more hard work. Sometimes you'll have to dig in and do a little bit of extras, and that is to bring in a contractor, because sometimes if the buyer brings in a contractor, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to overinflate the cost to try and get a better deal out of the bank, right? So you should have, if you're going to do any foreclosure work, you should have some contacts of contractors specifically, but and they're generalists, because those contractors, general contractors, are the people who have electricians, heating people, plumbers, roofers, all the like. They already know these people, and they can bring in that person, or you can call them and say, hey, listen, the whole chimney system has to be taken down and rebuilt. What would be a ballpark figure? Because these guys are quoting us $12,000, right? I don't know if that's the right amount of money or not. He said, well, you know, if it's a double flue chimney, you're probably looking at about $8,500 max. Okay, well, that's a difference between $12,000 and $8,500, right? So at least you have something to work with, and you're tasked with that a lot with foreclosures, just because of the nature of them, right? They have a lot of problems usually with them, and you just have to have those resources around you to be able to call on when you run into those situations, especially when they're trying to pick the bank's pockets for more money and get a better deal out of it. Okay. Again, as far as the listing side of foreclosures, I will say this: there's quite a bit of work involved in them, and unfortunately, the banks don't seem to value the participation of what we do and the amount of energy we put into the process. And I've seen a lot of bank foreclosures where they're offering buyers agents like 1.5 to 1.75% as a real estate commission. I personally don't work for that kind of money. If a bank called me and said, hey, Chad, you know, it's RBC calling, and I've got a bank foreclosure here for you, I'd find out the details of what they want me to do. One of those things is I dictate what I charge as my service. I don't just accept what somebody's willing to pay me. It's not how I run my business. So if it's anything less than what I would normally charge, because there's more work involved in this, right? Because be prepared. You get an offer accepted. I have had houses that I've had 7 or 8 accepted offers that eventually fell. Buyer went in there, they barely had enough money to close on the property, and then they discovered all this stuff about the house, and it's more than they want to deal with. So they terminate and they walk away after the inspection. Or they go to the bank, and by the way, every bank foreclosure gets appraised. So maybe they don't get the financing because it didn't appraise out. There's too much work, and the appraiser said it's not worth the amount of money that the buyer's paying right now. So they terminate. So you're going back to the drawing board, back to the market, and you're doing the work 3 times, 4 times, 5 times over in order to achieve a sale on the property. So up to you guys, accept them or don't accept them. Now, for me specifically, with the finance company that I worked with, excuse me, Sandy Rutledge. Do you guys know who Sandy Rutledge is? No? Okay, surprising. Sandy has been a very, very successful real estate agent and brokerage owner for probably 35 years. He and Gail Morris owned Domus Realty downtown Halifax. They sold Domus Realty and retired finally. But Sandy was the only other person that had exclusivity with a finance company or a bank. He represented a lot of CIBC mortgages. So anytime CIBC had a foreclosure, I knew Sandy Rutledge was going to be listing it. And anytime HSBC had a foreclosure, I listed it. But other than Sandy and I, all of the other banks shared the love, right? If you've got 15 agents that are constantly doing high volume of mortgage business, referring your bank that much mortgage business, you're going to want to partner with them. And anytime you get a mortgage or a foreclosure, those banks are going to reward those agents that are selling and referring a lot of mortgage business to them, right? So at this point, what I started seeing is RBC, Bank of Montreal, Scotiabank, they had a bunch of different agents getting foreclosures, right? So they shared it all, you know, not one. Maybe you'd have the odd person that did send them a high volume of foreclosure work, or sorry, mortgage business will get more of their foreclosures when they come up, right? But even if you do the greatest job ever, there are so many different collection agents that have different relationships And different banks have different relationships, like branches have different relationships with different real estate agents. So Clayton Park RBC, for instance, the collections division will call down to the branch manager and say, okay, we've got 2 foreclosures coming up. Who do you want to have the listings? He's like, okay, well, I'll talk to my my mortgage specialist, see who's doing the most amount of money business with us. And then say, oh, okay, well, this agent and that agent, let's farm those out to those guys. So you don't get a lot of repeat foreclosure work from the banks, right? So a lot of people really want that business. However, unless you're going to get a lot of business from the bank foreclosures, I'm not so sure. If they come your way, great. If they don't sweat it, because especially whereas it is a lot of work and they're not willing to pay a great deal of money in terms of commissions to reward the amount of work that you actually do, right? So just a note of caution. You have to fight for your own value, and the bank doesn't care. Take it or leave it, right? That's what you're going to get. Take it or leave it, right? This is what we pay, whatever it is, 3%, 3.5% that they'll pay you. If you want the listing, take it. If you don't want the listing, we'll find somebody else, right? That's been my experience. So what I would do if I were you guys, if you're interested in knowing more about foreclosures, there's 2 sources that you can go to. One is our very own MLS system. Go into the MLS system, and if you want to get a feel for foreclosures, the documentation that you will deal with foreclosures, I'm going to see if I can share my screen with you guys for a quick second, because I haven't done this in a while, over a couple of years, only because there hasn't been a need to in the last couple of years. Getting into our MLS system and looking at foreclosures specifically. But I'm going to show you what you can do in order to find bank foreclosures on our MLS system. Okay, can everybody see my screen there okay? Yeah, okay. Okay, so if you go into a residential search, down below, you can put seller's name in here. Do you see where it says seller 1 name? Okay, let's try, RBC and see if it brings up anything. So there's 59 listings that RBC has sold. Have you guys ever used that function before? No?
Yep.
Okay.
No,
No?
that's
Okay.
so cool.
Yep. So here's one thing I want to point out. See the tag in the window? Dead giveaway. Dead. All right. That generally means the property's been secured by the management company. Bank is in the process of foreclosing. So you'll probably see that. I mean, as you go on, seems to be a lot of mobile homes, but just about every one of these houses will have a tag in the window. See that little tag in the window?
Mm-hmm.
Next to the door to the left? That means that it's, there's a notice there and says, it's been secured. Don't be calling to ask, is it for sale? We'll let you know when it's for sale, when the agent's got the sign on the lawn. And it's just a management company contact. If you see there's an emergency with this property, it's on fire, there's an oil leak, there's a water spraying into the side of the house, call the management company and let them know. That's basically what that tag is. And no trespassing, obviously. People feel like bank foreclosures is fair game. I'm allowed to enter the property. Problem is, there's a lot of trip hazards, right? Grass is overgrown, there's metal stuff that's within the grass, you can trip over it, there's glass, whatever. It's a liability issue. They don't want you poking around their properties because they're not really safe, because they're unattended for the most part. So anyway, you can put RBC, there is the seller name, find out what RBC had going on. TD, let's see if they got anything there. 10,000, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That might actually be, I don't know, somebody's name, I can't imagine, but if you
Chad,
go,
do we have an alert set up? Like outside of doing a geographical alert and are setting ourselves up as a client, or maybe that is the way to do it. But if we wanted to know when something was going to come to market, so say, for example, with the RBC, with all those mobiles,
yeah.
If we wanted to be notified on a particular property, is there a way to do that within this system?
You can, yeah. Yep, you can put this, you know, one of your search criteria up here in custom searches, customize your fields.
Yeah.
Okay, you can put in the seller's name. Right, so if anything comes up that has RBC on it, then it will notify you under the collab center.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's what you use the customize and use your custom fields. And in the custom fields there, you can put seller name, and then you can specify what the seller name is, right? If it's RBC, if it's CIBC or whatever. So that's one way to find out about bank foreclosures. I'm going to go back to the RBC. Oops. And that is just so that you can see what one of those, I'm going to pull this up. You know what? I'm actually going to put it in the date, and I'm going to do like 2019, because I don't want to go back to like 2006, because we don't have the functionality on the MLS system of 2006 that we have today, where we can upload documents and share them through our system. So January of 2000 and let's say 18. Okay, so there has been only five foreclosures since January of 2018 that is listed RBC as a seller. What I'm looking to find is in the document section to show you what their Schedule A looks like. Okay, so don't know if we'll be able to get a photo. Yeah, nothing there to shows the tags in the window, but I'm going to go to the realtor view. So RBC Boyne Clark. So Boyne Clark is acting on behalf of RBC. So one hint, guys, you want to do, if you want to do foreclosure work, call Boyne Clark and just ask them who does their foreclosure work. What lawyer does it? Okay, little tidbit. If you want RBC business, sometimes the lawyers are going to be the ones who choose who gets the business. Right? Who do they want to work with? They want to work with you? Well, give them a call and just say, I'd be interested in knowing what I can do to get some of your foreclosure work. And maybe you'll get it.
So Chad, other than seeing the Schedule A attached, because I have seen that, so that's the only reason why I knew that answer. I have seen that and wondered kind of what that was. When is it also, it's not going to be a warranty deed, right? It's going to be another kind of deed there that you put on that. And I'm just wondering, is there any other things that will kind of spark our interest that it is a foreclosure other than the Schedule A and the fact it's not a warranty deed? Or is that's them?
Sparking your interest in what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is if I'm looking for, just say I'm showing a house and I want to know whether or not it's a foreclosure.
You're going to see it on the seller's name anyway.
Yeah, I just realized you showed us that. That's great. Yeah, okay. But what is it supposed to be? It's not supposed to say warranty deed. What kind of deed is it when we do the offer for conveyance?
Quit claim, QUIT, quit claim. Yeah. So this is the Schedule A, okay? This is preset, okay? The purchaser's agent has to fill in the purchaser section of it. But you as the listing agent need to provide this to anybody thinking about writing an offer on your listing, your foreclosure. All right, so you guys have access to this. Go in and do exactly what I did on MLS, because you have access to this, right? This is the bank Schedule A. So this is 3 pages. So this is fairly substantial. Mine was a page and a half when I dealt with it with HSBC. All right. So, and there, Jen, is your answer. Section 13 of the Schedule A, quit claim deed only. Okay. So that's what you as the listing agent, if you're writing the offer on behalf of the buyer, or you're looking at, you accept an offer. Okay, you obviously didn't read the Schedule A, because I find a lot of agents are just too quick to rush to the deal and not be very thorough in their assessment and their approach to things these days. They didn't recognize the fact that you need this Schedule A attached to all offers. And even if you did, a lot of times they're just so used to writing in warranty deed, because that's just what they're used to. The offers a lot of times used to come in, if they're not used to writing offers on bank foreclosures, don't realize it's not a warranty deed, because the bank does not warrant anything, right? Including anything to do with the information about the deed. It's got to be quit claim, right? So if you go into MLS, you plug in the seller's name, you can find bank foreclosures. If you're looking for bank foreclosure specifically for a client, and I'm getting off the topic of representing the listing side of it, but if you want to go in and find out if there's anything active currently on the market for foreclosures right now, RBC doesn't have any, right? If you put CIBC, see if they have any. 2. All right, what properties do they have? So New Waterford, property out there in New Waterford. I want to make sure that this is actually a bank foreclosure through CIBC. Yeah, CIBC Mortgages Inc. So this is an active. So if you have any investors looking for bank foreclosures, do what I just did. Okay, put it in there. Unfortunately, they do not have the bank schedule. So the listing agent should look at coming over to Keller Williams. We'll get her to list more effectively over here and make sure that the information is available, because we will need she has transfer of title shall be by quitclaim deed, no PDS provided to the sellers, the source of the water and sewer, if any, can be verified by the seller or seller's agent. Okay, cannot be verified by the seller or seller's agent. So it's an as is where is, any discovery is up to you. But this is obviously a foreclosure, it's an active foreclosure. So that's how you use your MLS system, track down some of these foreclosures. If you want to do foreclosure business, this is one of those resources you go to. That's how you would discover get down to specifically foreclosures and bank-owned properties that have either been, that are active on the market or have sold. Okay. So that's the MLS system. That's how you would discover some bank-owned properties that have either are on the market or have sold. The other place that I would go, guys, is to look for information, obviously, property online, right? So if you go into this, you do have to pay. If you're going to search around. So you notice when I look up a company name, I once in a while pop in to see if HSBC has got anything on the pipeline, right? So Submit Quarry, I believe they have 2 properties. One's the Brickyard and one is something else. So they have 2 properties, yeah. So the Brickyard Road and Albert Bridge, they've had that property forever and a day. But now this one, 4244 Walton Woods Road, HSBC Finance now has that property in possession. It is registered to them. They're now the owner of that property. This has been, if you go into the details, you can find some information about what happened here. So HSBC Mortgages, Finance Mortgages Inc., these are the folks that I did all the business with. They took possession of this property in 2019. Well, this is 2 years ago. Why isn't it on the market? Why isn't it already sold? Because there's likely a title issue they have to work through. That's why they haven't got it on the market and sold already yet, because otherwise they would have wanted their money back. All right, so you go in there and you look at the deeds, right, to see what happened. Like, did this come through sheriff's sale? Is it a trust? Did the trustee sign it from one person to the next? So E&D Brown is a barrister, is a lawyer, all right, and he was representing on the foreclosure. Okay, so he sent this property to foreclosure. They foreclosed on it, and HSBC bought it back. Okay, and now they're working obviously through a title issue before they can put it back on the market. So if you guys want to find out about any active foreclosures on the market, this is the place to go. Personally, if certain banks have repossessed properties, and I check in on HSBC, as you've seen, that's the only bank on my search criteria, because I want this business if they're ready to put this house on the market. But you can put CIBC and see what's there. So Submit Quarry. Oh, it's already been submitted. So anyway, you can go in there, company name. Oh, there you go. So CIBC Trust Corporation. Now, you will get their own commercial holdings. So there's a little bit of filtering out, because you'll see anytime you're going to see commercial or high assessment values and things like that, They've got 13 properties. Not all these are like foreclosed properties. They own real estate where their branches are. So you'll find those once in a while. Woodside Drive in Hilden, I'm going to say that's probably, it's residential taxable. These are homes. So anytime you see commercial taxable, and they don't seem to have any. So all of these would likely be foreclosures. So let's see if there's any right here in the Halifax area somewhere. Trenton, Waverly, Laurie Street in Waverly, Sheridan Street in Dartmouth. All right, let's see what's going on over there. Okay, so CIBC Trust Corporation, something going on. They might have just been the trustee, will grant of probate. So they just might be retaining this property on behalf of somebody who's disabled, somebody who is underage, maybe parents passed away, and there's a trust fund. There's a trust set up for a beneficiary, and CIBC Trust Corporation are administering the trust on behalf of the deceased. So that may be that particular one. But anyway, you can see where you can just go in, plug in the name of the corporation, and find out all about what you need to find out when it comes to these type of properties. And I find that this property online is probably my #1 go-to resource when it comes to finding out information about specific properties. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out to you guys. So yeah, I think that's the best I can do in terms of sharing the process when it comes to listing foreclosures. There's a lot more involved in the buying side than there is the listing side. But at this point, that's all I really have to say. So is there anything else that you guys, any questions that you guys have, or anything that you guys want to share?
That was incredible.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Very well.
I appreciate that. I can definitely see why the buying side was a longer session. So appreciate the insights on how to go through the system, though, to find those properties. I think that probably hunting them down is part of the challenge. Yep. when you're doing that. Also, thank you so much for the clarity on the take it or leave it from the lenders, because yep. You know, you have done a great job of schooling us on Wednesday nights about our value in this business. So I would find myself kind of going toe to toe and be like, no, I'm worth more. And they're like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Not in this case.
Right. Now, because it's a lot of work. Now, it's you're eventually going to get paid. That's what I will say. Don't discount yourself in fact that if the average seller down the street, you know, the average homeowner that brings you in and says, yeah, I want to sell my house. You give them an opinion of value and say, yeah, well, we should probably list it at in a regular market at $349.9. It'll likely sell around $335. That's generally $335 to $340. It should be where you are going to be able to get as a sales price. And they're like, oh, are you crazy? That's giving my house away. I want $375. Well, you can't establish that because unfortunately your market analysis say $335 to $340 and they're saying $375. Okay, bad business right off the get-go. The other thing they want to do is pay you 4% commission, and they're not paying you the 5 you're asking for. Well, that's a bit of a problem for me. So it's bad business all the way around, because that's a lot of sellers. They want more money than the house is worth, in your opinion, and they don't want to pay you as much. That's a constant battle in our world. The thing about foreclosures, and the difference between the foreclosures, that seller is probably going to not reduce, not listen to you. It's going to expire, and they're going to go with somebody else. Generally, when a bank signs with you, they stick with you until it's sold. They'll reduce until it's sold, and you're going to get it sells, and you're going to get paid, right? Whereas it's uncertain with a lot of other sellers, right? You get 90 days to sell it. If you don't sell it in 90 days, we're casting you out, and we're bringing the next guy in and replacing your sign on the lawn. Banks generally don't do that, right? 30 days, they report, you've made your efforts, didn't work, let's drop the price, and eventually you're going to get paid. Now, I will say this, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars in spin-off business representing foreclosures. And that is, people call you and say, oh, I'd really like to have a look at that property you have listed. It's a bank foreclosure. They go in there and like, whoa, this place needs a ton of work, way more work than I'm willing to do. Well, you just met a new buyer that you never knew before, and you get to work with them and help them find something else. I have listed a lot of properties and helped people buy a lot of properties just by meeting them at my foreclosures. It's a good venue to get buyer business, right? So I've done a lot of spin-off business just by having foreclosure business or foreclosures on the market. So the longer a house is on the market, by the way, I'm a little miffed about how quickly things are selling right now. This year specifically in our market, I've converted more business off my listings than I ever have. Like my claim to fame was over 90% of the business that I do is repeat and referral. It's not 90% anymore because I'm doing a lot more business with strangers because they're calling on my listings and I'm converting them into buyer clients and helping them to buy houses just because of the market we're in. When you have foreclosures, generally the market time is longer. It takes longer to sell those properties because not everybody, foreclosures in a lot of cases are not for the faint of heart. They need a lot of work and not everybody qualifies for the financing for a foreclosure. Sometimes people are like, oh yeah, we'll do a purchase plus improvement loan. No, sorry, we get declined, so we have to terminate. So the longer a foreclosure is on the market, the more chance you get to have that spin-off business. And that's the only reason I would say don't discount, listing it for whatever you're taking on it, 1.75% or 2%. I saw that CIBC one, I think, or the Royal Bank one. It's like $89,000 house for 2% commission. Well, that's not a lot of money at the end of the day, 2% on an $89,000 house. But if you're the listing agent, you're getting 2% on it. Well, you could meet 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 buyers, convert them into clients, and then sell them something else, right? And it's good because then you also get to meet a lot of investor clients. And investor clients, Yogesh, are you on here today?
Hey, Chad, how are you?
Yeah, you're there. Hey, good, Yogesh. Yeah, I thought you were going to join us. So you're one of those guys. You want to get into buying foreclosures, fixing them up, and selling them, right?
Yes.
Have you found any in the recent marketplace?
No. I not tried from last 15 days. I'm so busy. So I missed some today's session for some part. So can you please send me a recording also, Chad?
I don't know how to do that, but that is definitely, I would say, a Jessica question.
Yeah.
Recorded sessions, the YouTube channel, I think, is where we go for that. But yeah, definitely go in there, or feel free to give me a call. I welcome anybody to call me anytime.
Yeah. I need to talk to you personally, so I can call you after some time. So I have some questions. So
no problem.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to the chat side here. Good to see you or talk to you, Yogesh. We'll talk soon. So Tara and PI, anyone who lists Fairstone properties, Fairstone, is that Fairstone Financial? Tara from PEI, you still on with us?
Yes, it is.
Okay, hi Tara. So yeah, so Fairstone Financial, right?
I handle Fairstone. I've handled, my mother handled them for when it was a city years ago, and I have the exclusive contract for PEI for the last 20 years. And I'm looking to hook up with somebody in Nova Scotia that can help me figure some things out.
How so? What can we help you with?
Well, I do a lot of drive-bys.
Yeah.
And
so can you explain to the rest of the crowd what that actually means?
I sure can. So when you get it hooked up with a bank that's doing a foreclosure, they'll sometimes tell you 6 months, a year in advance, or sometimes with me, 5 years in advance. They'll want you to drive by the property and do a drive-by CMA. So you don't know what the house looks like. If it has never been listed before, you don't know how many bedrooms there is. You don't know what condition it is. They want to know if it's vacant or occupied, and they'll want pictures. So I travel right across the island doing this, and I don't get paid. So when sometimes there'll be Fairstone is a second lender. It's not the first lender usually. So it's a high interest rate. So they'll have a CIBC or a TD mortgage, and then they'll go and buy a vacuum cleaner and secure their house with it. So if it goes to mortgage sale, Fairstone will be second in line to get the money. So if, say, TD has a $100,000 mortgage on the property and Fairstone has a $20,000 mortgage on the property, they have to decide whether or not they're going to take over ownership of that property. And if I give them a price that covers them, they will get their money out. If I say the house is worth 100,000, TD gets their money first, Fairstone doesn't. But if Fairstone takes the property, they will get their money and then pay TD out.
Correct. So priority mortgages. I don't know if you guys remember the term back in the day from the pre-licensing Wednesday evening training, how that works. So what Tara's saying is that if TD has the first mortgage of $100,000 and that was registered first, and that was the first to get paid out when the funds come in after the sale, right? So if the $20,000 just isn't there, because if the mortgage between the first and the second mortgages, the total amount is $120,000 debt that's owed on the property, and the property is only worth $100,000. That just means that Fairstone is going to write off the $20,000 that they have into the property, because if it's only worth $100,000, they're not going to repossess it, put it back on the market, because then there's that cost of the foreclosure process.
Yeah.
You know,
Property management and foreclosures, lawyers' fees. Yeah.
Management company fees and so on. So that's another $20,000 on top of what they're already owed. So that's that they'll lose $40,000 instead of writing it off and only losing the $20,000 they have into the property.
Right.
The disposition costs are on average about 20 grand per property.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so that's what a drive-by is. So when in that delinquency period where somebody is not paying their mortgage payment. Now they don't, you don't miss a payment by 2 weeks, and then they launch the real estate crew out to do drive-bys and see what's going on at the house. It's usually when there's a couple of mortgage payments behind, 2 months, 3 months, then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we may have to launch legal action against this property owner and this borrower. We need to know how much this property is worth. So we're going to send them to do a drive-by. And you start taking pictures from the curb, you document the condition of the home, and then you formulate an opinion of value based on a drive-by. Now, they can't hold you to that value because you go inside and there's no kitchen, there's no furnace, there's no pipes, there's no wiring, it's stripped inside.
And there's cats and dogs.
Yeah. Yep. My number one issue with foreclosures is cat pee smell.
Mm-hmm.
Knock you out. Your eyes are stinging by the time you leave a lot of those houses, believe it or not. So anyway, so that's what a drive-by is. So for Fairstone, we do have Fairstone over here in Nova Scotia as well. Are you looking for an affiliate over in the Halifax market?
I guess I don't know. I just like to know how they work over there.
Probably the exact same, to be honest with you. They don't operate much differently. There's only two provinces that I found that work differently, and that's use HSBC is coast to coast. Alberta and Quebec work differently than Nova Scotia. Ontario, very much the same. New Brunswick, PEI, Newfoundland, Saskatchewan, BC, they all run with pretty much the same policies and lending, but Alberta, for some reason, and Quebec specifically, two different ways that they dealt with things outside of what we dealt with here.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, there was another question over here. Oh, Sonia, Chad, what's the training that I do on Wednesdays? I help the pre-licensing group, guys, on Wednesday nights at 6:30. I've been doing it for a few years. Anybody that's challenging the real estate exam, going through the course, I give people a hand on Wednesday evenings, helping them study, helping them interpret some of the information and things like that. So that's what I do on Wednesday evenings at 6:30. Yeah, so I think that was all the questions over there on the chat side of things. So does anybody else happen to have any other questions? No? All right, we're all good then. Okay, guys, well, thanks for joining in. I hope you found some nuggets of information that you can take away and make some decisions as to whether or not foreclosures are for you. And you've got some resources around you here to be able to to call on if you need to, if you discover you have an opportunity in foreclosure and you're not sure, hop onto this recording. See if you can revisit some of the information that we've covered. I will, I'm available if you guys have any interest in calling me, and I can help you out. It sounds like Tara, you've also got some experience in the foreclosure business as well. So maybe you could help to pitch in from time to time if somebody had a question. Other than that, you guys have a great afternoon.
Sure, no problem.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
I
Okay.
found a
you,
really
Chad.
helpful video. That was really helpful.
All right, sounds great, Mark. Good to see you again. At least I'm only seeing a photo, but good to hear from you.
Good seeing you too, Chad. Good seeing you too.
All right, my pleasure. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Chad. Time well spent, buddy.
All right, my pleasure. I'm not sure who just chimed in there, but
Mike Arthur.
oh, hey, Mike. Yeah, long time no see.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, glad that you could make the time to join us today. So,
Thanks,
all
Chad.
right, my
Appreciate
pleasure, everybody. You're very
Have a good
welcome.
one.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.